Hi, welcome back again to Marvin and Friends in Service for a Healthy World for humans and non-humans alike. Always a huge pleasure to have one of the top men on the planet speaking the truth, Dr. John McDougall. Good morning and a big warm welcome.
You know, I think we ought to clarify something. I'm far from being a world expert on climate. I would say I'm a world expert on medicine and on nutrition, human nutrition. I just got into this climate thing out of desperation because I have 7 grandchildren and they have no future. I mean, these are really desperate times. And just like you folks on the continent, we are suffering from this COVID-19, and the reality of climate change is, even though it's escalating so much in terms of politics and worldwide, people are becoming concerned. It just never seems to be fast enough. Well, I think what I'm going to try and do in these times of desperation is, over the next half an hour or so, I'm going to try and give you some hope. I'm going to try and give you some information, some knowledge that will help you face your day-to-day life. And maybe it will help you have a future. I started out, when I discovered all this many years ago, I started out very depressed. But I'm hopeful these days, and I'm going to explain to you why. So if you would like me to, I would love to go into this presentation.
Fantastic, thank you. Always inspirational listening to your fantastic presentations, Dr. McDougall.
Well, thank you very much. All right, there we go. Okay, if everything looks well to you.
That looks super, yep.
All right. What I want to talk to you about is, I want to talk to you about an integrated self-help approach to solving the world's greatest problems. Now, I gave this presentation the first time in October of 2019, when I was awarded the 4th Lifetime Achievement Award by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And I was honored. They gave me this award for the work that I've done over the years, primarily in medicine and nutrition. But I asked them at the end of the presentation if I could give a 9-minute talk about something that was near and dear to me. And they gave me 9 minutes. Actually, they gave me 21 minutes. And I was welcomed with some enthusiasm, at least immediately. But it really didn't change much for over the year, didn't get much response. And then I was invited in October of 2020 to give another presentation for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And this is the presentation that I gave to them in October of 2020. I'd like to share it with you. And I have to say that I've gotten a better response. Maybe that's because the presentation is better, and maybe it's because the world has changed. And I think that's the reason. People are becoming much more accepting of the importance of diet in terms of disease, in terms of climate, and now in terms of COVID-19. The truth is simple and easy to explain, and I hope that I'm able to convey that to you, that I understand my topic, and that I take a very simple self-help approach that you can do. This is not technology. Technology is not going to solve our problems, but everybody seems to be looking for a high-tech approach. For example, rather than doing social distancing and wearing masks and other public health measures that are very simple, we have people looking for the miracle cure, the vaccination. They want to have the problem solved for them rather than doing it themselves with simple techniques that were actually used for over 100 years. When it comes to my profession, which is taking care of people who have chronic diseases like diabetes, arthritis, high blood pressure, heart disease, various kinds of cancers, all kinds of bowel problems. In terms of chronic disease, again, people are looking for the magic pill, the magic surgery, the magic solution to their problems, whereas we have primarily as a world, ignored the importance of doing simple things like exercise and sunshine and eating a healthy diet. And I believe a healthy diet is a diet that's near vegetarian, if not vegan, based on starches with the addition of fruits and vegetables. And so it comes with climate change. Rather than reducing the CO2 production, and as I'm going to talk to you about, introducing a starch-based diet, we're looking for carbon capture. We're looking for all kinds of high-tech Star Wars solution to our problems. Maybe there are people who are even thinking that we'll have aliens come from outer space and save us, suck up all the gases we've been putting in the environment. No, we need a simple approach. The truth is simple and easy to understand. What I want to share with you is the fact that Diet is the common denominator when it comes to chronic diseases, climate change, and infectious diseases. COVID-19, I'll be talking to you about. Diet is the common denominator. And as a consequence of this interaction, this interconnection, we have poverty occurring worldwide. We have abuse of animals, killing of billions of animals. We have deforestation, economic deprivation. We have people's personal appearance being devastated. We have depression being caused, and we have wars being caused as a consequence of an unhealthy diet. But there are all kinds of side effects. And if we can solve this basic interaction between the three most pressing problems for the 21st century, then we'll be way ahead of the game. In addition to all the other efforts people will made, we can do something that is within our control, which is to change our diet. We can change our diet immediately. I want to talk to you about diet and chronic diseases. I've been a board certified internist for half a century, and I've run a live-in residential program for 34 years. And we have data on our program that I'll talk to you about in just a minute. But that's what I've been dedicated toward, is taking care of people who have these chronic diseases. And these chronic diseases are due to food poisoning. Food poisons are primarily dairy and meat products, and they result in various illnesses such as obesity and all kinds of complications related to obesity, such as heart disease and high blood pressure and various kinds of cancers. And let's see, diabetes, and both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. But as I talk to you about chronic diseases and I claim cure for diabetes, you have to understand I'm talking about type 2 diabetes. And heart disease, of course, when you rot the arteries, you end up causing strokes and impotence and gangrene of the legs and kidney failure, all kinds of problems when you rot those arteries with atherosclerosis. Various kinds of cancers like prostate, colon, breast cancer are due to food poisoning. Food poisons are your animal products and oils, as we'll talk about. Also various gastrointestinal problems such as GERD. And it should be obvious what you put in your intestinal tract causes to be healthy or sick, wouldn't you think? And of course, problems such as constipation. The way you solve these dietary diseases, which I've been doing in thousands of patients over the years, is with a diet based on starches with the addition of fruits and vegetables. This is a traditional diet of human beings. If you think about it, all large populations of civilized people, like Aztecs and Mayans and American Indians and so on, Chinese, etc., all populations of people throughout verifiable human history have been primarily fueled by starch. That's maintained the bulk of the diet. We're talking about the Aztecs and Mayans, known as the people of the corn. We're talking about people in South America in the Andes, living basically on potatoes. And of course, the Far East is really easy to relate to. We think about people living primarily on rice. Before 1980, 90% of the diet in Asia among 2 billion people was rice. And of course, the Mideast, Europe is known as the breadbasket of the world, the breadbasket of the world. That's what the Middle East used to be known as. Of course, now it's known for its Burger Kings and McDonald's and Taco Bells and so on. Sad to say, but the solution to food poisoning is to change people's diets. We published data on this. For example, we published data on 1,703 people who had been through my program, which I ran for actually 34 years. But this is data on about 10 years of the program. We looked at these people. We did not exclude anybody from the study. And what we found is over a 7-day, we're talking about a week, a 7-day period of time, the average weight loss was 3.1 pounds. The average drop in cholesterol was 22 milligrams per deciliter. If you want to convert that to international units, you divide 22 by 38 and you get international units. The average decrease in blood pressure was 18/11 millimeters of mercury. But these are people who have high blood pressure. And we're able to get nearly 90% of people off their medications, particularly their high blood pressure and their diabetic medications. They were able to reduce or stop them. In most cases, they were able to stop them. And I would generalize this to most medications people were taking, particularly symptomatic medications and medications that are intended to treat risk factors rather than basic underlying diseases. An independent study of our program was done by Oregon Health and Science University. They did a one-year study. This is a randomized controlled trial. This is the highest degree of research that was done by the neurology department of Oregon Health and Science University. We were primarily looking at people with multiple sclerosis. And what we found over a one-year period of time is that the average weight loss was over 19 pounds. And that's unrestricted eating. The average cholesterol drop was similar to what we got in 7 days. That was a 19 milligram per deciliter drop. The insulin levels were decreased, and people with multiple sclerosis got tremendous benefits in terms of fatigue. About 80% of people with multiple sclerosis are troubled severely by fatigue. So this is an important finding. One thing that was really important and surprising to a lot of people, but not to me, was that the adherence over a year to the diet was 85%. Why it wasn't surprising to me is I'd taken care of approximately 6,000 people in a live-in setting and almost an equal number of people in an outpatient setting. And our live-in setting was so effective with the foods that we taught them, with the education that we taught them, with the medical care that we gave them. It was so effective that I wasn't surprised that we got 85% of people to follow the diet and be adherent to the diet, compliant to the diet for 1 year. Well, since COVID-19 in February of 2020, we've had to close this live-in residential program. And now we run it as a internet program, a telemedicine program, a teleeducation program, a telehealth program. And what we found is actually running it over the internet is more effective. People are more compliant. They are better educated. They get better medical care than we were ever able to deliver to these people who had to travel thousands of miles by airplane and train and cars and had to stay at our resort for 12 days. So, you know, it's been a great improvement. Good things came out of a very difficult situation. Our work has also been studied by research that was done in New Zealand. This is totally independent of my program, except for the fact that they used the McDougall diet and they taught the McDougall principles. And what they got was what they bragged to be the largest weight loss ever published in scientific literature. That's true, of 25 pounds maintained over a year. They got a similar reduction in blood pressure and cholesterol. They also were able to reduce the medications, similar to the way that we were able to reduce medications. You know, most people shouldn't be on the medications they're on in the first place. And in the second place, we correct most of the problems that people have that they're on medications for. So it's obvious that you take them off their medications. Sick people take medications, healthy people don't. And their compliance rate was similar to ours, again, because of very effective, very enjoyable diet and program. Let's talk about climate change. I first learned about climate change through Al Gore's work. Al Gore did a series of lectures in 2006 called The Inconvenient Truth, and that woke up the world about how we were polluting the atmosphere primarily with carbon and the various gases that are produced as a consequence of all of our industry and travel, et cetera. And he published this report and told us we really had to do something serious. Well, Al Gore just published a follow-up to his Inconvenient Truth. And unfortunately, little has changed in the 14 years between these various lecture series. As a matter of fact, he says that we pumped as much carbon since 2006 up to date. We've actually pumped as much carbon into the atmosphere during that short period of time as we had prior to all of history through the year 2006. Now, one thing that Al Gore didn't mention in his documentary was diet. Now, that may have been because Al Gore ate the rich Western diet, and I judge that from his personal appearance, which, by the way, has improved dramatically as he's changed to a healthier diet. And at that time, Al Gore, our vice president, or who had been our vice president, Al Gore was a black Angus farmer. So he may have had some prejudice. Likewise, in his update for The Inconvenient Truth, his sequelae, it's called, for his Inconvenient Truth, he does not mention livestock as an important factor in solving climate change. Hopefully, Mr. Gore and the rest of our politicians will get around to understanding the importance of livestock. Remember, we have a report that came out in 2006 that really woke people up again, just like Al Gore did. This was called Livestock's Long Shadow. It was a 407-page report supported by the World Bank and put out by the United Nations. And what it said was that livestock produced nearly 18% of their global warming gases compared to all transportation, like cars and planes and trains and et cetera, which produced nearly 14% of the greenhouse gases. And that was an extensive, thorough report that was done in 2006 by the United Nations. This data that was gathered by the United Nations was reevaluated by the World Watch Institute. I actually had Robert Goodland, who was one of the major contributors to the World Watch Institute, who'd served on the World Bank as an environmental advisor for 23 years. So a man very knowledgeable about this subject. Well, Dr. Goodland told us and publishes in his reports that if you take into account other factors that the World Health Organization, the United Nations did not take into consideration in the livestock's long shadow, and you take into consideration other factors that should have been taken into consideration, that the livestock industry actually contributes greater than 51% of our global warming gases. So try and remember that figure, more than 50% produced by the livestock industry. The Eat Lancet report came out in 2019, and this report, which was published, of course, in the journal Lancet, by the Eat Lancet Commission, this report told us that we only had 8, 10, 12 years left, and that the way that we were going to make a difference was to switch to a diet of vegetables and grains and legumes. In other words, a starch-based diet, and limit. What do you mean limit? You know, would you tell a cigarette smoker to limit their smoking intake to avoid lung cancer? What do you mean limit? They should have told them to eliminate the consumption of meat, all meat, even poultry, even fish, etc. But they didn't go that far. But that was a wake-up call that really stands as a landmark as far as the importance of diet in terms of climate change. What it boils down to is that our CO2 production is primarily from the livestock industry. Even farmed fish are a great contributor. And the way you want to solve the problem is to get our calories from various kinds of starches like rice, potatoes, corn, sweet potatoes. Those are the foods that will make a difference in terms of our environment. Looking at research on what would happen when people become vegan. There have been several papers published, and I'll address this one, which showed that if you switch to a vegan diet, there would be a reduction in production of greenhouse gases by as much as 80%. Now, remember that figure I gave you a minute ago that says the World Watch Institute considers livestock to contribute 50% or greater of the global warming gases. And by switching to a vegan diet, you can cut it by 80%. I mean, a simple math tells you that overnight, remember, this is something that we can change individually and as a planet overnight, we can reduce the production of greenhouse gases by 10, 20, 30, 40%. Huge. Taking care of people who have chronic diseases, as a doctor, I learned that the reason they're sick is they continue to injure themselves with various things. Like in this case, you have a cigarette smoker. Cigarette smoker pumps 10, 20, 40 cigarettes a day into his or her lungs, and the lungs try and respond in every effort they can to stay healthy. They cough, they produce mucus. The body is trying to heal from this repetitive damage. The problem is that the damage outpaces the body's ability to heal. And as a consequence, we're not able to solve the problem. When it comes to climate change, I offer you the same explanation. I am just amazed at how much my patients have had their ability to change when you stop the repetitive injury, like from cigarette smoking or primarily from their fork and spoon. What if we stop the repetitive injury to our planet? What would happen? Well, Mother Nature, I've observed, is just like a small aspect of her production, the human being. She's always trying to heal. You just got to stop injuring her. So we can stop injuring her by obvious things such as the pollution caused by industry, but we can make a huge difference when it comes to diet. Now let's talk about infectious disease. The infectious disease that's on our mind these days is COVID-19. That's all people can think about. I'm sure if you turn on the news, most of the news will be about COVID-19 and the consequences, the poverty, the suffering that has occurred as a result of this infection. And I feel terrible that I haven't been able to hold my grandchildren for the past 8 months. And I feel terrible about the people around me that are suffering so much with poverty. And I, in many ways, wish this would never happen. And I hope we get a vaccine early. But there's a good side to COVID-19. It's made us aware. It's made us aware of our ability to change overnight. And we need that change overnight when we're dealing with climate change. And my individual patients need that change overnight if they're dealing with a heart surgeon or a cancer specialist, or even if they have diabetes. You've been sick for too long. Well, COVID-19 has made us acutely aware of how we worldwide and country by country, we can change overnight, close our restaurants, open testing lines, all kinds of adjustments have taken place. And it's also made us aware of the impact of diet, of making these changes, the impact of making these overnight changes on our environment. For example, they tell us that you can see the blue skies in China and the canals in Venice. You see that there are fish in the canals in Venice. And there's livestock walking across our city streets. Estimates are as much as 10% reduction in the global warming gases has occurred as a result of this change that has been caused by COVID-19 over this short period of time. The potential is huge. Human beings are able to make this change. Well, even before COVID-19 came to Europe or came to the United States, in fact, it was observed in Italy at about the same time as it was in China. It was observed that people who went on to the more serious form of COVID-19, which resulted in hospitalization, mechanical ventilation, drowning in your lung fluids for 2 weeks, and death, occurred in people who had comorbid conditions. They had other health problems prior to catching this virus. They had heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney disease, chronic lung disease, which is due to smoking. People who have these particular problems, in particular obesity, that's one of the strongest factors involved. They're the ones that go on to suffering the serious complications. The CDC came out and told us that if you have these comorbid conditions, the diabetes, the obesity, et cetera, that you're at 6 times the risk of hospitalization and 12 times the risk of death. And on the continent, in Europe, what we have is we have the British Medical Journal coming out and telling us that if we're going to save this planet, and I really mean it, if we're going to save this planet, you can cut down all the carbon pollution that you want from industry, all the transportation, all the factories you can close. And unless we fix the food, we're not going to catch up to this problem. It's game over, folks. How does diet affect the intestinal tract? Let me spend a minute on that and give you an increased risk of having infection. The reason that we have an increased risk of infection and people are unhealthy is when you eat an unhealthy diet, what you do is you damage the intestinal lining. And it becomes permeable, in this case, to the viruses. And so the viruses can pass through the intestinal lining and also through the lung linings. There's a cell layer that that has integrity when you feed it well, when you eat a healthy diet, and it's destroyed and becomes incompetent when you eat an unhealthy diet. There are all kinds of various what we call phytochemicals in plants that can be attributed to their antiviral effects. And I could spend a whole day talking about these types of phytochemicals, but you understand the power of plant foods in terms of its various nutrients, in terms of protecting you in prevention of diseases. Well, add infectious diseases to your armamentarium of protection. A study published recently showed a mechanism that really brings to heart the dietary implication when it comes to COVID-19. What is found is people who have high cholesterol loads in their bodies. These would be people who also have heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and so on, because they eat a high cholesterol diet. For all significant purposes, cholesterol is only found in animal products, dairy, meat, poultry, fish, and that's how you load your body with cholesterol. And when you load the body with cholesterol, what happens is the linings that separate the lungs from the blood vessels become permeable. If you look at this one cell lining here between the blood vessels where the cholesterol is present and the virus is present, and the inside of the body, you see that there are lipid bridges. These lipid bridges, these are rafts that allow the COVID virus to get through from the blood vessel into the lungs to convert the person into somebody who has a very serious disease. Mechanical ventilation, hospitalization, death. We've identified one of the primary factors. The more cholesterol in the body, the greater the number of these bridges, of these rafts, and the more ability of these rafts pass through the viruses. They become larger in number and more efficient. So there's the mechanism for you, the cholesterol. Well, what can you do with cholesterol? Well, I showed you our results. And in 7 days, look what you can accomplish. You can accomplish a 22-point drop in cholesterol. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you'll have to stop for a minute and give me a little credit for the experience I've had, which is a half a century in medicine and 34 years of running residential programs and taking care of over 12,000 people, 6,000 in a residential setting. Is I see people go through tremendous improvements in their health in 7 days. It's only reflected by the cholesterol. It's reflecting the fact that we can get them to reduce or stop their medications in 90% of the cases. They lose weight, their blood pressures come down. It's 7 days. Well, if I could see those kind of miracles in chronic diseases, I believe that I could see the change also in infectious disease. In other words, what I'm telling you is when somebody acutely gets sick, if they only get the call to change at that time, it's not too late to change your diet. You know, you have a week or two before you're converted from an asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic person into somebody who ends up in the hospital. Well, look what we can accomplish in just 7 days. And if you believe that cholesterol mechanism, we can close those bridges. Now, can people change? I want to talk to you about the ability of people to change. I presented a lot of reasons to change. Can we change? Well, I want to take you back 100 years to World War I. And what we had in World War I is we had the British blockade of Germany. What they did is they set up a blockade around the North Sea. And as a result, the Germans were deprived of all kinds of economic advantages, including a food supply. Well, the Germans came with the idea that you need to eat a well-balanced diet. And so they kept the meat production going. And it was a result of not changing their diet from the pre-war years is that 400,000 Germans died due to malnutrition. If you note, Denmark is affected by a blockade in the North Sea. And they were under as severe as restrictions as the rest of Europe, and particularly Germany, which had the British blockade in effect. Well, Denmark had a very, very smart, very powerful man. His name, Nikhil Hinhidi, and he had ends with the government. Nikhil Hinhidi was a famous researcher on nutrition in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he had discovered that human beings needed very little protein. And he discovered that people could live on vegan diets, in other words, no animal foods at all, for long periods of time. So he went to the government of Denmark, and he asked the government to institute policies that resulted in the change of the diet of people. 3 million Danes changed their diet under the direction of Dr. Hindhede. And what happened was Dr. Hindhede, he convinced people to make severe changes. They no longer ate pork unless you owned a pig farm. And beef was so rarely consumed that only the richest people in Copenhagen were able to eat beef. Instead, the people ate the soybeans and the root vegetables and the grains that they were previously feeding to their livestock. Dr. Hindhede published his data in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1920. And he talked about how 3 million Danes went through the war without any suffering, without any hunger. And then he went on to tell us how the Danes got healthier. During this period of time, during the time of World War I, what happened is the overall death rate among Danes, 3 million people, decreased by 34%. This occurred primarily in chronic diseases, but it also occurred in acute infectious diseases. At the time of World War I, we had the Spanish flu, which killed, they estimate, 50 million people worldwide. And people were fighting the Spanish flu with the same public health measures that we have today, 100 years later: face masks, social distancing, contact tracing, etc. Well, we had the Spanish flu during this period of time of World War I, also the period of time when the Danes changed their diet. What you see is that the people in Denmark had the lowest incidence of severe Spanish flu during this period of time when they changed the diet of any country in Europe. If a comet was heading towards planet Earth, and we had 6 months to make a missile to blast that comet out of its destination towards Earth, China would join, Russia would join, Italy would join, England would join, Bosnia would join every country together to make that missile to save our planet, wouldn't we? Well, ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 is that comet, which hopefully will wake us up and cause us to make changes that are long overdue. I certainly hope that I'm able to get your attention. I tried to get the attention of the people at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. I tried to explain to them the importance of diet. They understood, because these, ladies and gentlemen, 5,000 of them who heard this lecture, at least 5,000, already knew that you could take care of chronic diseases by stopping the cause, by no longer throwing gasoline on the fire. In October of 2019, I introduced many of them to the concept that diet can deal with climate change, and so brutally have we all been introduced to the effect of COVID-19. And hopefully people understand that there's some positive things on COVID-19. It may save us from the ultimate disaster, from the time when we would be talking with Florida under 20 feet of water. I told these ladies and gentlemen at the American College of Lifestyle Medicine that they were the ideal people to repurpose their program to focus on climate change. I mean, after all, these were the men and women who had taken care of patients with chronic disease since this organization was formed in 2004. So they were experienced with diet. They studied diet. They took board examinations on diet. After my initial presentation, a doctor came up to me from the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. He said, "I'm here to take my accreditation boards. And I spent years studying to be a lifestyle medicine doctor. But what's the sense? If what you're saying is true, and it is true, folks, what's the sense? How can I practice medicine on a dead planet?" And ask you, all of you, when you put your priorities in line, how do you do whatever you're doing on a dead planet? This has to be number one as far as concerns. Well, ACL members, they don't know how to build Teslas. They don't know how to put up windmills or solar panels, but they do know about diet. And I called upon this organization. I call upon you, anybody who's listening, Just put things in proper order. Make your priorities right. This is a moral issue. This is the future. This is the future of my grandchildren and your grandchildren, your children. Is there anything more important? I don't think so. All right. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you. Do you have any questions?
Always enjoy talking to you. And that was wonderful. I love how you put these new slides in there, and so easy for people to look and see the permeability of the lung tissue, the permeability of the intestinal tract, keeping that all strong through, you know, what you recommend through diet. And it's such an easy concept for humans to get behind what's happening. And I'm with you, Dr. McDougall. This for me is the biggest challenge. And when humans' backs are against the wall, we all have to push the rock up the hill together. And we can change it. So, you know, I thank you always for your time, for your passion, for your knowledge, for sharing with all of us how we can all get together and save the world, because we do really have to do it.
Well, Marlene, just get it out there. You know, I can only do so much on this side of the screen. You got to go out and make sure everybody's listens.
Yeah, well, I do. I'm on it every day. Bill and I are launching our Human Ecology Project. We're huge environmentalists. We look at food and sustainability. We try and help people to understand how they can make a huge difference, no matter how small. So, but I'm excited also because now we're going to be talking in the next session with you, hopefully before Christmas, if you've got time to fit me in.
Yeah.
I'd love to share with you the new presentation you've got on potatoes, which is one of our passions. So my readers and viewers will be excited to hear about that next.
Okay, good enough. Sounds real good to me. Anytime you want to do a show, it's really no effort for me at all. It's great enjoyment. So
it's so fantastic. We're all completely grateful to you for everything that you do for all of us every single day. So enjoy the rest of your day, and
yeah, you too.
Again soon.